no doubt coronavirus has changed the way people live, and those changes are creating potential opportunities for the custom electronics industry, and that's what we're here to talk about today. With me today are Kyle Steele, President of Global Wave Integration in West Hills, California. Hi, Kyle.
How you doing? Thanks for having me, Jason.
Also with me is Alex Capecelatro, CEO of Josh.ai. Hi, Alex.
Hey, glad to be here. Thanks, Jason.
And last but not least is John Clancy, VP of Residential at Crestron. Hi, John.
Hey, Jason. How are you?
I'm great. All right, let's jump right into it. Again, these current stay-in-place orders that we're seeing all across the country for coronavirus, COVID-19, whatever you want to call it, are definitely affecting the market. But let's look beyond that. Let's look at the opportunities coming out of the gate that are going to be available for integrators and how this situation might impact some particular product usage that integrators are facing that they'll be able to present to their client base. So let's talk about voice control first. Kyle, let me ask you that question. Where do you see the impact on this current situation long-term for voice control?
Long-term, I think we're definitely going to see an uptick. Even in our commercial projects, if we look at common spaces or conference rooms, I think there's going to be a need for less interfacing with the remote and touch panel. I think having that touchless interface and using voice and group settings, I think is going to be more appealing moving forward. And I think just across the board, I think there's especially in our projects, the high-end residential projects where there's a lot of staff and people in the home, maybe there's another added layer of voice as opposed to going to touch panels and that being your kind of like central command for the home. I think as people get more comfortable with voice, we'll definitely see an uptick.
Alex, let me direct this to you. Obviously, this is in your bailiwick. What are you hearing, what do you see voice happening coming out of the coronavirus lockdown?
Yeah, it's a really interesting time for us. For a long time, we've really looked at voice as an additional interface, but not a replacement. The thought is that sometimes you want to grab a remote, sometimes you want to hit a switch or a touchpad, and sometimes voice is really ideal. But now, because of coronavirus, we're hearing and seeing the need for voice control in more rooms and for more applications than ever. An example that came up recently was one of our dealers said their client really doesn't want to be touching the front door every time they're coming and going. And so instead, they're actually using their garage door and voice control for a hands-free experience. They go to walk the dog, they just say, open the garage, they walk out that way, and they're not having to touch that door, which maybe was touched by a delivery man or a housekeeper. It could be any number of people. And so I'm not sure that this will be a forever thing, but certainly in this moment when people are being very mindful of spreading germs and touching surfaces, we're seeing voice control just really growing to touch more devices, more use cases, and again, just more rooms. It used to be really your living room, your kitchen, your bedroom were the main three. We're now seeing voice control in a lot more rooms really starting to grow.
John, obviously Crestron makes all sorts of different interfaces. Where do you see voice, the impact on voice?
So I agree with both Kyle and Alex. I think Kyle's perception or forecast of an uptick for more people wanting voice, definitely I see. And Alex's idea of more places in the home, more applications, definitely. And honestly, I think there's a tremendous opportunity for existing customers, right? Here's the thousands and thousands of systems that have already been installed to go back to your existing customers who now live with these in ways more intensely than they ever have before, to go back to these customers now and offer voice as an add-on or an upgrade to those existing systems is such an obvious target.
Yeah, to that point too, what John's saying, one of the things that we're seeing is, and Kyle can attest to this, many of the clients that our dealers work with in a normal business setting are traveling, they're busy, and it's really hard to sit down with them and say, what do you want to call your scenes? What do you want to call your rooms? And so getting the voice control really dialed in is difficult. But now the fact that people are staying at home, working at home, living at home, it's a lot easier to really go through those scenarios and say, hey, when you wake up, what do you want your good morning scene to do? How do you want it to trigger? What do you want to happen when you tell the system to play your favorite music? And And a lot of that can be done remotely, which is one of the great things about modern day voice control. And so it is definitely an amazing opportunity to go back and to dial in systems without even having to add much hardware. And I think Kyle's had a few of these recently where you've had completely finished systems that you just add voice control on top of, but the underlying systems stay the same.
Exactly. A great example was last week. We had a client who's staying at another state while this is all going on. Here in California, we can still work. So he wanted a little refresh in his living room. Existing Crestron system is kind of like a mixed use media room. Upgraded the projector, kind of did a refresh in the Crestron. But since he was gone, he wasn't aware of what Josh can do. So as additional kind of bell and whistle when he came back, he didn't even know about it, but he was just through the roof when he has wellness lighting installed and we're using the micro as like the RGB wheel and interface, and he was floored. He really wasn't so focused on the upgrade in audio and video. He was just impressed with the lighting.
So Kyle, let's pick up on what Alex was saying there. Give us a sense of what that conversation would be like with a customer who, let's just say you did offer voice as an interface option before, and they either selected a limited version or only in a particular room. How would you have that conversation with a customer? Obviously, you don't want to look like some sort of ambulance chaser when you're coming back with a technology option. What do you give me a sense of how that conversation might go?
Well, it really goes kind of the power of the demo. A lot of these clients, you mentioned voice, and that initial knee-jerk reaction is privacy. They don't understand the differentiator with Josh, the local processing, and they think of Alexa and what they hear in the news. So it's really kind of almost sneaking in that solution on top of Crestron just so they can play with it. But that emotional response once they start playing with it, I mean, it's like 100%. They love it.
Yeah, and just to piggyback really quick on what Kyle said, privacy has always been incredibly important to us and to our customers. Crestron feels the same way. But now that people are spending a lot more time at home, I think the idea that a mass market voice control system could be listening, especially when they're having business calls, is a little bit more urgent than maybe it was in the past. And so again, while privacy with voice control has always been important to us, I think it's something to really educate the client about today, that you can have voice control in the room. Like I've got voice control in this room right now, but it's not sending anything out to the cloud. It's not going to start delivering ads. I'm not worried about anyone listening in. And that's really important with the clients that we all work with.
That's kind of how we present it as well. It's kind of like Google wants your data, Amazon wants to sell you stuff, but Josh is really focused on home automation.
Yeah, that was kind of, I was going to transition into a category that really kind of works hand in hand with what you're talking about from the privacy standpoint, and that's the home network. I had heard from some integrators in this environment where now all of a sudden the client is having to work from home, his kids are home from school, they realize their home network is not up to snuff in terms of just bandwidth, but let alone cybersecurity. So Kyle, what have you seen from your client base in terms of home networks?
Yes, we've received many calls in Los Angeles, CEOs now working out of their house. And it's actually unexpected in terms of besides cybersecurity, acoustics, sound isolation. They're now working in a home office and they still have their family in the room next door. So having that kind of barrier and privacy, not in terms of just cyber networks, cybersecurity, but also acoustics.
Yeah, I think it's not just people forget about the quality of the video camera when we're doing a Zoom meeting like this, but also that room acoustics, the hard surfaces or whatever it might be. It's definitely an absolute opportunity. John, what are you hearing from your dealer base in that opportunity?
Oh, look, I am the perfect example. I have 2 college students here at home and a middle schooler, all right now simultaneously learning remotely, right? I probably hold no less than a dozen calls a day, all video calls. So this is the worst case scenario that I'm living through here. So, dealers are definitely reaching out, definitely trying to figure out how they can enhance these systems, and not just from a network perspective. And you touched on sound isolation, but from the corporate side of our business and what we deliver in the boardroom and in the corporate space in regards to unified communications, and how to implement that or bring that into the residence. And so, there's some interesting things that we're working on there that we're pretty close to talking about publicly.
Yeah, and sort of on that, one of the things that we've often found with Josh is focusing on different room environments as sort of a pitch is really helpful, because when you talk about voice control in general, sometimes people have a hard time figuring out when and why they might want it. But when you talk about voice control in the kitchen or in the bedroom, it gives them context. And the context right now is the home office. And prior to this whole coronavirus outbreak, I don't know that we heard a lot of home office sort of needs that were the first thing the clients thought about. But now the notion of, as a client, I want to go into my home office, close the door. Maybe I want to have music. I want to be able to watch CNN easily. I want to have good lighting, probably automated shades and thermostats, all that stuff. It becomes an environment that you can put together a really compelling package for. And sort of to Kyle's earlier point, it's very similar to commercial light. You talk about the corner office, which is a very similar setting. We've already seen a lot of these environments wanting voice control. And I think the notion of setting up the same environment in your home office as your actual office is going to be an opportunity that a lot of our dealers can really leverage.
And I think it's not just a short-term opportunity, but a long-term. I've heard from a couple of integrators who've told me that they work with national builders who have revised their floor plans, and every home that they build is now going to have a home office in it. And it's not just a room where you can drag your laptop in and sit down in a chair. It's going to have all these amenities that you just described, Alex. So let's turn to another category, and that's security. It hasn't really seen this uptick in crime, but invariably when there's higher unemployment rates, the crime rate does increase. Kyle, what has been your experience? What have you seen in your neck of the woods?
Yeah, I mean, same clients, same CEOs, along with cybersecurity is camera upgrades. There is a real concern in Beverly Hills, Hollywood Hills, Malibu. It's a real ask and it's a real need. I mean, the quality of video has definitely dramatically increased in the past few years. So at this time, everyone's kind of revisiting their systems and seeing what they can do, because they're now holed up in their house, they're working from home, and they're looking around and seeing how they can make improvements.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is going to be a very important aspect. Personally, we've had 2 minor break-ins in the last couple of weeks, and that's just down in Palm Springs. The first one was we had a car left in the driveway overnight, and we have a security camera that technically covers the driveway, but this was a dark part and you couldn't really see it too well. But the next morning, I noticed the door to the car was open and thought that was kind of strange, went back through the security footage, and 3 guys had sort of hopped in the car, tried to start it, an alarm went off, they ran and ended up killing the battery. But like, that probably would not have happened pre-COVID. This is a very safe neighborhood. And then the second one was actually a sort of a gate entrance into the backyard. We've got a whole security system with beams and whatnot that would have gone off. But basically someone had pried open this gate, kind of peeked around and then decided to leave. And so to Kyle's point, we've actually increased the number of cameras that we have, added some more tracking, and then we're looking into just, instead of only setting alarms at night and certain times, we're kind of leaving the alarms in the backyard on at all times because we're not back there, so we might as well leave it on. And that's just personally for us. So I definitely agree that it's both an opportunity, but also, unfortunately, it's a risk. And I think if unemployment numbers keep going up, to Jason's point, this is going to be an ever increasing value add that dealers can offer.
I think I have an interesting story, very similar, right? My neighbor across the street had a very similar event where people had tried their door handle. They didn't lock their car door. Inadvertently left their garage door opener, not inadvertently, but left it in the car, and the people who got into the car had opened the garage door. My camera video caught it all, and I gave that to the police for them. But again, yeah, you're starting to see, I guess, a little bit of. I don't ever remember. I've been here for 25 years. Ever remember anything like that here? And so yeah, there's definitely concern there, and people are. And again, my video capture of that event is a perfect example, and perfect reason to offer to our customers.
I started doing that for our neighborhood. We started sharing Ring cameras, and we're all communicating because there's been some, vehicles kind of almost casing the area. So now as a community, we're sharing video and commenting on, social media regarding it. So it's definitely more of a communal thing.
Yeah, not to go down the rabbit hole too much, but I think those of us on this call know Ring is not always going to be the most secure in terms of, there are lots of articles about ways to sort of, impede the traffic on it. You can sort of put these Wi-Fi blockers. And so just another reason to consider higher end, more professional systems that, are going to be a little bit more foolproof.
All right, let's talk about one more positive, perhaps, area, and that's this growing category of wellness. And it's kind of a generalized term, and I know it covers a lot of different things, but I'm hearing tidbits from integrators regarding indoor air quality and human-centric lighting and other things that they can be able to bring to the home during these lockdown environments. So, John, let me start with you on this, because obviously Crestron Home interfaces with all the sorts of things we've been talking about: voice, security, networks. Where do you see some of the wellness opportunities coming in relation to smart home control?
So it's funny, we definitely have a bigger demand these days. I must have had, no joke, probably a dozen dealers reach out in the last week asking for tighter integration to Delos, right? Delos is a partner of ours. We are in the midst of doing some things with them, but continuing to strengthen our relationship and our offerings specifically around air quality. For instance, I personally just replaced my air filters here with a new filter that I read about that filters out viruses, right? 6 months ago, would I have even looked at that or thought about that? No, right? So that type of mindset, right? It's in the front of everyone's mind. How do I protect myself and my family? And how do I tie that into my home system? So at least I'm aware of what's going on and how my house or the systems within my house can respond based on need. And so these are the things that I think that are really, really, again, really important. Some of them have been available for a little while, but I think the times are again, bringing this to the top of the request list for us.
So go ahead, Alex.
Oh, just to jump on that, one of our dealers recently said what he's kind of seeing as wellness is the new LEED certification. And when you look at markets, especially like California and Colorado, this is super important. It's really front of mind for a lot of people. But then you look at places like New York, and we've had clients, or rather dealers for a number of years now, that are looking at putting in sound systems to just have some sort of ambient noise to reduce the sound of sirens and traffic in the streets. The notion that we want to be able to sleep well, we want to be able to live well, we want to be comfortable, and we want to be healthy is, again, only going up. But the thing that's interesting is wellness touches so many different aspects. And one thing that we're hearing with gym closures is the need to set up better home gyms and Pelotons and rooms for that, which, if you can, have great sound systems and a TV. And, there's so many opportunities that I think wellness is, as much as I love Delos, or a partner of ours as well, I think it goes beyond any single brand or any single feature. It's really a holistic approach to making the home a sanctuary to be able to live in.
Yeah, Kyle, I know you guys are working on some things in your showroom regarding wellness. You want to tell us about that?
Yeah, right when the stay-at-home order came down, we're in the process of moving in our building and building out our wellness showroom. So about 2 years ago, as a company, we did a real pivot towards wellness. We're in the middle of doing our first wellness spec home in Los Angeles. So this has been a real need, and when builders and developers and architects were coming to us saying, hey, we need a wellness home, that was kind of new for us. So we really started digging into it, to the point where I'm now myself being well certified. Our building is going to be well certified. They're in the process of writing wellness version 2 right now. And if I had to guess, there's going to be some modifications to that standard based on this pandemic. I think companies and buildings are looking for solutions to know if it's safe to occupy the building. That's something we're working on demoing out of our building. But this has given us a chance to really look at what does wellness mean in terms of solutions. I mean, for example, access control. With this, we're now installing a touchless access control for the building. when we talk about wellness lighting, the impact that has, circadian rhythm. The only thing that's pretty much fully functional in our building right now is our bathroom. We've already brought some people over, and without saying anything, they walk in the bathroom and it kind of dims up slowly instead of that middle of the night feeling when you hit the light switch and kind of blinds you. And then they hit a button and it changes color, and it's 100% of the time. And they're like, wow, this just feels good. It's one of those things, that emotional response again. And we don't know why exactly, but it just has that healthy impact. You know, our team working out of the building, the color temperature of our lights right now are 5,500 Kelvin, which is daylight. So you're like working in daylight within the building, and you just feel more productive. So we're doing all kinds of solutions in our building right now to really focus on that. Clean air, clean water, clean energy. We have sensors where we can measure the quality of air outside the building versus inside the building and have that on our dashboard. You can't change what you can't measure. So if we can have this interface where people can actually see what wellness means, the art of the demo. If you drive around LA right now, I mean, the air quality, you don't see that pollution and that thin, disgusting air. I mean, it's beautiful out. You know, this virus is awful, and there's 200,000 deaths worldwide, but there's also 8 million people that die every year due to air pollution. I'm hoping this kind of pandemic kind of stirs that conversation up as wellness as a whole, because it took a dramatic event like this, I think, for people to be in their home and really think about this stuff.
Kyle, one thing I'm curious about, we've often heard it's easier to sell a large TV for a lot of money because it's, you know, easy to see, it's easy to understand the value. And wellness is sometimes a harder thing to figure out. How do you get people to understand the value, and how do you price it? What's been your answer to that?
Exactly. It's kind of like when we're talking about the LEED certification. The theory of it's great, but it's not anything you can really touch, feel, smell, right? With wellness, you really can. If you have that empirical, you know, data and information they can play with. I mean, I think lighting and circadian rhythm, that's something you can see and experience. That was the idea around our wellness showroom, is that they can come here, they can sit in our motorized gravity chairs and just have that sense of floating. And then you have the soundscape going. You have the biophilic design of artwork and mirroring technology with natural elements. So the idea coming into the space, I think they'll get it. Even to this day, there's a lot of architects, builders, designers. They don't understand we do lighting control or shade control. So if you tie that all into a package where they can have that experience, I think that's a real value add. And I think they understand walking away. I mean, even I think we've had 3 meetings here in the building, and the walkaways were, I mean, it was pretty impactful for them. And it's led to large commercial projects just in a 15-minute demo.
It sounds super dynamic. I can't wait to see the final outcome there. You know, we just kind of scratched the surface here and talking about some of these areas. You know, other areas, obviously commercial. You just mentioned it, Kyle. You know, commercial installations now. I've heard from some integrators where they're able to get into restaurants and corporate facilities now because they don't have to bounce around patrons, and they'll be able to pound those out during the daytime faster. Outdoor installations. Just talked to an integrator this morning who was saying you know, his clients have no hesitancy to have him come out and do an outdoor installation, versus indoor. They're like, well, we'll let you know when we're ready to have you come in the house. And then obviously upgraded home entertainment. You know, I think once people have sat home watching Tiger King and all these different shows forever, they're going to realize that they need better sound systems. They need better audio or video. So I think those are going to be some long-term opportunities. Let me kind of finish out by asking each of you, what do we think is going to happen from a pipeline standpoint, both in the short-term nature and then hopefully the long-term nature for the business? Let me start with you, Kyle. Do you think there's pent-up demand out there from the customer base, and what are you doing now to fill your pipeline for when all the restrictions are lifted?
Absolutely. I mean, we're actually trying to step up right now. And to John's point, Crestron's the master of building management systems. When you think about these commercial applications, historically, you get lead points for installing Crestron for measurement and verification. Well, now you get those same innovation points for well standard. So I think as well version 2 really rolls out, I think it's going to have more stickiness than lead. And so I think that's going to be a huge uptick for companies like Crestron, Global Wave Integration, Josh.ai. there's going to be a lot of pent-up demand, and we're preparing for it.
John, what do you think integrators should be doing right now to help fill that pipeline?
Oh, well, look, it varies by region, right? And the restrictions put on any individual location. But I think, you know, there are lots that we're doing with our dealers that I get feedback on. So some guys are in their shops, you know, building racks and assembling and preparing for upcoming projects. Some are focused on purely just training their employees because they can't do anything else. Some are outfitting their showrooms, which are long overdue in need of an update and upgrade. But I think when you look at this, right, in most cases, many of the projects we know about that our dealers are working on aren't canceled, they're postponed, right? So you have this, what looks like this massive crunch point when the restrictions get eased and everyone's going to go back to work and try and complete these projects that were close to being delivered. But again, I think there's probably that longer term risk of a drop off because new projects aren't being signed. They haven't been signed in the past couple of months, right? So again, I think focusing on the upgrade opportunities, the outdoor spaces, right? I think, you know, look at the Northeast where it's just starting the spring is hitting. It's getting nicer out. People have been confined to their homes for a really long time. The usual trip to the beach may not happen this year, right? So, you know, investing in your own outdoor spaces at your own homes are another great potential opportunity for our dealers.
Alex, what do you recommend?
Yeah, I feel like we need at least an hour for all of the things to discuss. I'll try to keep it somewhat brief, and I'll start with what I see as kind of the negative followed by a little bit of the positive. From the negative perspective, at a very macro perspective, we're looking at unemployment numbers that are just larger than I've ever known in my lifetime. We're looking at the cost of oil being negative. We're looking at CPI being down. I mean, across the board, you're seeing all the signs of an economic recession ahead of us. I don't think we're seeing even the beginning of it yet, with the Dow still holding steady. And in our industry, that doesn't necessarily mean that sales stop and that business ends, but it does take a hit. It means the client that owns a bunch of restaurants might not be buying their vacation home or not doing the upgrade. If your client's an investor in the hotel industry or the travel industry, they're probably trying to figure out how to save their business right now. And so I think there are a lot of signs that suggest we as businesses need to be very mindful of watching our costs, thinking about this as a long-term potential recession. I know a number of our dealers have already had some layoffs and furloughs. And as much as I don't want to encourage that, I think it might be a smart thing to really watch your costs. There are a couple of markets where dealers we have are hiring and growing, and it's great if you got that demand right now. But I think we need to look at the warning signs and really think about 2020. I don't think is going to be that bad from an economic perspective. 2021 is when the real impact might start to hit. And so that's sort of the doom and gloom downside. The upside, of course, is we're fortunate to work in an environment that is almost boosted by what's going on. The need to have great homes that are healthy and functional, I think is going to be more important than ever. You know, I see friends that are basically saying, we're not going on vacations, we're not spending money on a new car, but we are investing in the home because we need to make sure the HVAC works. We need to make sure our automation is set up right. I do think that there are interesting new areas like putting sensors in more rooms to trigger more automations, forgetting about even voice control, just how to make things a little bit more intuitive is really important. As we get into sort of mid to late 2021, I think we'll start to see conferences come back. You know, we're looking at a vaccine is probably not going to hit for at least 12 months, but you know, CEDIA 2021, I think we'll start to see a lot really coming back. And to John's point, there is going to be a lot of pent up demand. I think there are a lot of projects that are being put on hold, but they're not going to be canceled. You know, we know folks that have homes that are being built in Napa. They're going to get built. They just might not get built for a couple years. I also think it's really interesting to be watching the adjacent industries. What's going on with interior designers? What's going on with architects? Are they getting into projects? Are they selling? Are things moving? And so I know Crestron's really good about this as well. We're big on trying to meet with and chat with other partners just to understand how we can help each other. So It's, I think, going to be more doom and gloom for a while before it really gets better. But I do think that we're in one of the best industries to get through this. And for those who have been through the last recession, it's actually an opportunity to grow your business and to grow your tactics in a way that you otherwise wouldn't when things are normal.